Before you bill customers and create invoices in Hydroscribe, there are two things you need to determine. Number one, how will the due date for each invoice be calculated? And number two, if the invoice is not paid on time, when is the system to charge the customer a late fee? Now, to set up both things, we're going to go to Preferences and click on Default Late Policy Settings. Now, on this screen, you can set up two different policies. One policy for regular monthly bills, and then halfway down on the screen, you'll see this line, and then there are more settings for setting up a policy for work orders and service requests. Both sets of settings work the same way, so if you know how to use one, you know how to use the other. So we're just going to focus on the top part here to set up a policy for our regular monthly bills. Okay, so there are two choices we have. Number one, we can set up a policy for a fixed number of days after we bill. That's the option we're going to cover in this video. And then we'll cover the other option in the next video. Okay, so a fixed number of days tells the system that if, for example, I bill on the first of the month, I'm going to then give the customer a set number of days in which they can pay the invoice without being penalized. So, what is that number of days? You have to go to the fixed number of days field and set it. Say, for example, I want to give the customer 15 days grace period to pay their invoice. What that means is that the system is going to add 15 days to the billing date, and that's going to be the due date on the invoice. So if I bill on the 1st and I give 15 days, then the 16th day is going to be the due date. Okay, the next thing I have to do is to tell the system when the invoice is actually late and when to actually charge a late fee. So I have a choice here. Even though I've given the customer 15 days to pay their invoice, I can still say, I want you to wait 4 days after this 15-day period before charging a late fee. So this field, it's late after how many days after the due date, that determines the wait period after the fixed number of days before charging a late fee. Okay, the next thing I have to decide is, how do I want a late fee to be calculated? I can either choose a percentage of the bill, or I can charge a set dollar amount. Say, for example, I want to charge 10% of the bill. All I have to do is enter 10 in the late fee percent field. If I would rather charge a $20 fee for each month or each week, whatever, I would leave this field zeros and put 20 in the late fee amount field. Then the next thing I have to do is tell it how often do I want to charge this $20 fee. And you'll notice that by default, it says do not charge a late fee. Policy not active. So in order for this policy to be in effect, you must choose one of the three options below. Either you're going to charge that fee each day that the payment is late, or each week that the payment is late, or each month that the payment is late. In this case, I'm just going to set it to each week that the payment is late. I'm going to charge the customer $20. Okay, the last thing that I have to do for this policy is to decide when to send out the first notice. This is the first notice. Now, by default, the system will send a notice each time that it's going to charge the customer a late fee. So what we're determining here is, when do we want to send out the first notice? Let's say the customer has 15 days in which to pay this. How about if we send the first notice on the 10th day of that period? So in here, I'm just going to choose 10 days. So after 10 days, following the billing date, they will receive a reminder telling them that their invoice has to be paid. Okay, now that I've chosen all the settings, all I have to do is press the submit button, and my policy is now in effect. And that's how you set the policy for a fixed number of days after the billing date.